To help us analyse this poll and what it means for voters and political parties, let's bring in Andrew Smith to the show. He's a senior lecturer in contemporary French politics and history at the University of Chichester. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew Smith. As you just heard there, the winners of these local elections deal with local issues, but many have described this vote as a bellwether for next year's presidential vote. Do you think it's a preview?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting insight, certainly, into what we'll be seeing in 2022. But I don't think it gives us a roadmap to what will happen. As you mentioned, we kind of expect in some ways a replay of the second round of the presidential in 2022. But, really, that's not what the results we're seeing tonight say. I think, Emmanuel Macron was hoping that this would be an election in which République En Marche could be kingmakers, if not, in fact, winning regions themselves. But as we've seen, they are nowhere near the races and completely unable to be kingmakers in this at all. And actually, as we saw with Macron himself voting in Touquet, I think, where he ended up suggesting that perhaps he was going to be voting for Xavier Bertrand, who could be one of his main rivals come 2022. So big story there, I think, in terms of that falling back for République En Marche. There is still no kind of ground game, no local machinery, and so they really were quite disappointing. But also, the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, she called after the first round for voters to rally. She looked for a national rally behind her party, and the early indications are that she did not get it. Of course, we've heard already in Provence, Alpes-Côte d'Azur, there was no success with Renaud Muselier being returned by the sounds of it, according to those opinion polls, those exit polls, excuse me. So I think there is something interesting there as well. A falling back for Le Pen, not at the races for Macron. And tonight's story, I think, will be about Les Républicains and remember them, the Parti Socialiste. And it looks like a very old-fashioned map again, with the Socialist Party and the Républicains again dominating that electoral map of France.
And Andrew Smith, you mentioned briefly there that the major winner of this election so far, and the past elections in recent years, has been abstention. Is the French electoral system in crisis?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because the rate of abstention in the first round was shocking, really, and it doesn't look to have improved very much at all in this second round. There are, of course, mitigating circumstances. We've just come out of COVID. People are busy doing other things, enjoying life. There is the football on. The Tour de France started as well today. So there are other distractions for people. But that in itself shows that there is some issue in terms of drawing people to the ballot box. A lot of people see there's not enough change, there's not enough kind of positive options in play. A lot of people said in the first round that they felt that they weren't candidates for them, or that the candidates themselves were campaigning on national issues. We saw a lot of people saying that they wanted to vote on local issues, but that maybe wasn't what we were getting from a lot of those regional candidates. So it is interesting to see. There was some studies in Le Monde, for example, which talked about the fact that there was a higher rate of women abstaining than men, and while that was traditional and reflected past performance, as it were, it also perhaps reflected greater precarity and the economic impacts of COVID on things like the service sector, for example, which might impact women much more than men. So there are, I think, historic reasons to see some of this abstention, but this is very much a big crisis, as it were, especially when we see the upcoming presidential just around the corner.